Morning everyone, welcome back to the shed for a quick update on my Harrier build. In the last instalment I looked at the cockpit on this thing and also how I built some of the formers and detailed the inside of that section. This time I'm going to take a look at the airframe a little bit. Last weekend I managed to get the chance to go and visit Nick Greenall. Nick is a really knowledgeable guy on Harriers, to say the least, and kind of has written books and, you know, run the special interest group and all of that kind of thing, and sort of what he doesn't know about Harriers kind of isn't really worth knowing. And so when he contacted me last week and said that he'd seen some photographs of the Harrier and would I like to quickly pop over and, you know, have a coffee, I gratefully obliged. So took the short trip over there and spent a good couple of hours with Nick, taking a look at what I'd done, also looking into other areas and details that actually I'd missed completely and didn't really know about. So it was a really useful exercise, and I'll show you over the next couple of minutes what that meant in terms of the actual build. When you take a look at an Airfix Harrier, there are a number of things that jump out at you once you know about them. The first thing is that due to some mould wear, this intake opening here, jet nozzle opening here, has actually broken away slightly. So on the edge of this fairing here, it actually goes inwards, whereas it should bulge out. Now what that means is that you need to build up this section and put a curved edge onto this plate and then fair it in. This plate then goes over the top slightly of that front cold nozzle. While you're doing that, inside of these openings here, on the real aircraft there are structural members in there that blank these off and seal them from the outside world. Airfix didn't do anything about that. All they did was that they just built the engine inside, had the nozzles poking out through the side of the fuselage, and then left these areas open. So what I did, I decided that I would fill those. Nick used plasticard on his Mammoth Sea Harrier build, but I tried to do something that was a little bit easier and a little bit quicker. So what I did is I dammed inside here with blue tack and also on the outer edge, and then I filled in the holes with casting resin, and that now means that I've got a kind of perfectly sealed area that I can mill and machine to allow those nozzles to be fitted once the model's painted. Nick assures me that getting the front cold nozzles into place is a bit of a bind, and that perhaps I should think about removing this panel from here, creating it in plasticard, putting the nozzle into place, and then putting the panel back in and then fairing it in. I'm not sure about that too much, but I'm planning to perhaps put this nozzle into place before the model's painted. I'm certainly going to take Nick's advice to take a look at that. I don't really want to be painting this model and then forcing what's probably going to be quite a delicate part into place. So I'm going to have to take a look at that. The second area is the back of the fuselage. The air brake on an Airfix Harrier is actually too long. The opening is too long, rather. The air brake itself is fine, but what Airfix did was that they assumed that the air brake actually sat inside the fuselage, whereas it doesn't. Only the front 2/3 do that. The rest of it rests on the back of the fuselage. So what you need to do is you need to fill in 1/3 of the opening. And while you're doing that, you then need to build the interior of the air brake bay. Airfix give you a part that goes into that section, and essentially it just follows the contours of the inner fuselage. It doesn't have any depth or anything like that. They made no effort whatsoever to create the structure inside the air brake bay. So what I've done is I've built up this section using plasticard. Nick kindly offered me a resin piece, this one here, to use either in the model or as a pattern. I've no idea where this part comes from, to be honest. Heritage, maybe? Don't really know. I certainly wasn't very keen on using it in the model. It may well have fit, I don't know. I didn't really like the way it was cast. I didn't really like the way it was detailed too much. So I decided to use this as a pattern and create my own plasticard section. I'm sort of happy with that. Now that the fuselage goes together like this, that detail looks pretty good inside there. And although when it's on its feet, you're going to see very little of that, certainly with the air brake in place. If anybody wants to take a kind of peek at that area, at least I know that it's detailed up. This open hole here is for the rear undercarriage assembly. On the real Harrier, these doors are closed on the ground, so all I'm going to do is just close those doors up, fix the undercarriage leg in place and leave it at that. I'm not going to bother detailing anything inside there. The final area that needs to be dealt with at the moment is the inside of the main intakes. Airfix's intakes are actually too narrow in diameter inside, so they need to be opened out. What that means is that I've had to cut them into sections, the inner lining to be cut into sections, and then I'm going to have to build the curved section that goes to the turbine blade of the Pegasus engine and make it wider than the part that's supplied in the Airfix kit. What that also means is that when I open up the intakes, they're in the box behind me, when I open up the side of the intake and those auxiliary doors that drop down when the aircraft's on the ground, I've got to be able to see through that, so I couldn't really fudge the detail inside there. As much as I'd like to ignore it and just put intake blanks on there and then forget about the rest of it, they're quite big holes once those doors are dropped down in 24, so I'm going to have to put some sort of detail in there so that when you look through it you see the drop down door and then you see the hole behind it, and then through that you'll be able to see the turbine blade. So whether I like it or not, I'm going to have to paint and detail at least that section. The ramp as it goes from the edge of the intake into those doors is still going to be slightly big on my model, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put blanks in that section so you won't be able to see that. It's all a bit of a faff actually, the intakes, and it's something that I'm having to do almost kind of piecemeal at the moment and just work on it a little bit and then kind of move on. It's one of the reasons why I've moved away slightly from the cockpit. I feel that all I'm doing is adding tiny little pieces and I'm kind of getting nowhere, and it's sort of bogging me down a little bit. So that's why I've started working on the airframe, at least then I can see some progress. And finally, tail section. I'd originally created a piece to go on the back of the aircraft. I think I may well have shown this in an earlier video, and this was the piece here. It was a blank section that I was going to glue to the back of the fuselage and then build all of the curves around that. Now the curves that go from here to the end of the stinger on the end of the tail are a mass, I mean a mass of complex kind of curved sections. And then when you add on to that this tail section is almost like a consistent thickness all the way down and then drops away towards the stinger, you've just got a whole headache of odd parts, odd sections and odd kind of curved pieces that need to be put together for this part of the model. So what I've done is I've had a section milled for me in resin profile board. This was done by Tim Perry. Thanks very much, Tim. Brilliant. He is the guy behind PP Aero Parts, if you remember from years ago. He's a very talented guy, very talented pattern maker and model maker, and he offered to create this section for me. So now what I have is a section that's perfectly square, and that will allow me to create a perfectly square structure on which I can add plasticard profiles and then the curved section, which will be done in milliput. I'm hoping to get these things fixed into place at some point. It'll give you an idea of how the back end of that will look. It also meant as well that I could start looking a bit more at the tail fin. The tail fin on this model was originally this structure here. Now there's been a slight change of plan. Originally I was going to make a T4 out of this model with the laser nose, which I showed you before, and also the receiver on the tail. But Nick showed me a photograph last week of a fantastic 20 squadron aircraft that was fitted not only with ferry tanks, the large 330 gallon ferry tanks, but also ferry tips on the wings. Now we're pretty sure that there's only 2 examples of Harriers, first generation Harriers, carrying these ferry tips and being photographed with them in place. One was the transatlantic GR1 that flew to New York from St Pancras railway station. The other one is this T2. So it was too much of a gift, really, and something that I just felt that I had to do. So at the moment, this is now being converted into a T2 with a pointy nose and also with a new tail section. What this has also meant is that I could replace this tail, which is actually inaccurate. For some reason I measured the base of the tail and I was 5mm out in this section here. I don't really know how I did that, but I was miles out. So what it's meant is that I can create a new tail that's got that bottom section looking the way that it should and being dimensionally accurate. At the moment this is still not completely the right shape. I need to take some material off this section here and curve it down slightly, but it's a much more accurate structure than the original tail that I made. So with the fuselage together, the stinger in place, if I turn it the right way up, and then the tail on, that gives you some idea of what this model is going to look like once it's finished, and certainly how big it is as well. It keeps getting bigger. It's going to be dominating my workbench before very long. So that's where we are with the model at the moment, getting there slowly. I can probably throw this in the bin now. I've got a new section, tail's all done, this piece can get thrown out as well, don't really need that. So moving onwards and upwards, the next area to be dealt with will be the wings. Hopefully I'll be able to get onto those within the next week or so, and then start reworking the cockpit once more on the other side. I'll bring you more information on that within the next week or so. Hope you've enjoyed this update on the Harrier. Thanks so much for watching the last couple of videos, and have a great weekend. I'll see you soon. Bye.